Lance, welcome to the show, man.
Hey, bro. Thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good to see you too. We were just saying how it's been way too long. I think I was on your podcast probably years ago at this point.
I think it was, I remember it was right in the beginning of the pandemic, I think,
Okay.
or like
Yeah.
mid, because I was working out of this office studio and I remember we were chatting and you were one of the interviews I was in there for the first time. So I think it was actually maybe right before things got weird in the world.
Yeah, and then who knew 2 years later it was still going to be weird. I mean, obviously you're now traveling the world and globetrotting and doing all that stuff, man. And I'm so happy to see your growth and obviously you have a new book out and we'll get to all that stuff. But why don't we start with who is Lance today? And then we'll break down how you got there.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's been such a journey, bro, to get to where I am. And I've had to unlearn a lot of shit to kind of remember the truth of who I am today. And yeah, I've been really thinking about what that is after writing a book and after, having a podcast and working through personal development for so long, as to like, who am I right now in the world? And yeah, I feel that my purpose is to really help people work through the shit and the bullshit stories of the past that hold them from moving forward, because that is what I've had to do. So I can only preach and talk about things that I have done in my own life. And for me, it's been a challenge up until this point of working through those old limiting stories of the past that have brought this foggy lens that has kind of stopped me from really believing and remembering what I'm here to do. So at this point in time, it's gotten so much clearer, it's clear as to what that means to me in the world and like how I can be of service. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, is figuring out, as you can probably relate to, like, how can we serve at a bigger level and use our talents and our uniqueness to help people, inspire them to do the same. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at right now, brother.
Yeah, for sure. So I love the idea of, unlearning stuff and unlearning the bullshit to get to where you are today. And I think it's so true. Like a lot of my story now is I chase what society told me to chase for so long. And the biggest lesson I learned was when you go and get it, you're still miserable, right? There's so much internal work that needs to be done that nobody really talks about. And I always say, look, I champion you to go make $1 million, but I promise you, the second you make $1 million, you're going to go, how do I make 10? Like that's not the answer to anything. But let's unpack a little bit of like some of the bullshit that you had to unlearn to realize who you truly are.
Yeah. So just like anybody, I've just gone through a lot of different challenges and struggles in my life. I grew up playing hockey. My goal was to play professional. I came from a very challenging upbringing of a lot of emotional, a lot of fighting, a lot of really, I don't know, man, like so much stress growing up that it's stuff that I've had to really go back and figure out, how do I work through that? And which led to me getting into addictions, and which led to me throwing my hockey career down the toilet and having to work through a bunch of different things within family and stepmoms and just a lot of family stuff, a lot of inner turmoil, which has led me to having to go back and figure out at what point in time of the timeline did I start to unravel? Did I start to pick up on these bad patterns and these addictive behaviors? And that's kind of been the journey, having to work through death, losing my younger brother to suicide, my dad to cancer within like, a year and a half.
Wow.
Having to battle through those internal struggles of disbelief, and especially in the entrepreneurship world as well, like comparing myself to other people and working through that and being able to unlearn a lot of that shit that I've told myself that I'm not good enough, that I'm not worthy of doing the thing, right? As we all go through. And as much as people want to pretend that they have it all figured out, I think it's all BS. I think everybody is struggling with something and they've had to overcome that. And it's just, and this is the beauty about a podcast too, is like you start to figure that, you start to realize like everyone's human, everybody's going through something, everybody's got something that they may struggle with now or have. And it's beautiful because some people are just further ahead in certain aspects, but not everything. And I think for me, it's just constantly peeling back these layers and just looking at what behaviors, like what's causing me to do this thing and what is the root of that? You know, what is the trauma behind it? I'm a big believer of trauma being the root to a lot of our addictions and a lot of our behaviors, our coping mechanisms. And it's not always easy to look at these things. It's not easy to go and sit and look at ourselves and feel into these things because it's painful. It can bring up a lot of stuff. So my path this far has been really figuring out what that looks like and how I can move through it. And when challenging situations happen, like how do I react? What are my emotions like? How do I move through it? And yeah, man, that's kind of been, there's so many layers. I've experienced the athlete, the bartender life, the entrepreneur life, the author. Like I've been able to see these life through different lenses, traveling the world. So my perspective of the world is pretty vast, and I've had to really learn these different challenges because I believe that's my purpose, is to help people move through this shit. So that's kind of been my mission, and that's kind of been what I've been doing.
Yeah, dude. I love it. And it's so true. Like the podcast does humanize these individuals, especially when, you know, you've had some massive people on your show. I've had massive people on my show, and you sit down with them and there's always, at least for me, there's always that little bit of nerves before. Right. And then probably 5 minutes into the conversation, you're just like, oh, we are the same. By the way, I have to tell you this. So I developed this process. If you ever get into a room with somebody who you've admired, you've looked up to, you followed because of who they are and what they're doing in the world, picture them sitting on the toilet, taking a shit with their pants around their ankles. And you realize that we're all in that position, right? And sometimes we find ourselves in that position and we don't have toilet paper. And immediately it humanizes that whole scenario. And you're like, okay, cool. We are just two human beings, right? Yeah. And there's a point to me telling you all this. Yeah. We talk about how we put these individuals on a pedestal and we're like, oh, they're perfect, but it's so not true, right? They're lacking in some form of life. There might be really far ahead in certain things, right? We talked about Ed Milet being worth $500 million, and I think his net worth is even more now. But also, with that being said, I'm sure he lacks in other parts of his life that you and I thrive in. And we have to look at the human as a whole versus that one lane, that one perspective, right? And so as you start to see life in different lights, right? Like the new, you know, as an author, which is a process and a half in itself, because I'm writing a book right now too. What have you learned? Like, do you feel like you become almost like a different person, or just a different level of you or a different layer of you as you shift into these different roles?
Yeah. I mean, in order to take on a new character of your life, you got to put away the old one, right? I talk about this too. It's like we choose these characters and we do these things that align with that character. It's like if you're playing a role in a movie, right? You have to rehearse that character always over and over and over again until you become that character. That's what we do in this life. And then when you decide that that character is no longer working in this stage of the movie of life, then you have to take on a new one. And I use that just for people to think about, like when you want to create something else, you have to play a new character, and you have to do the things that align with who that character is. It's all you can think and visualize and all the things, but you have to do the things daily that align with that character. So for me as an author, or as a podcaster, whatever I want to call myself in this world, you know, whatever label, like it's just, I just I had to kind of meet myself at where I wanted to be. And it took a lot of work, bro. As you know, writing a book, I had to fight through a lot of the belief of like, nobody's going to give a shit about this. Like, why am I writing a book? Nobody cares. Who cares? Right. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's not true. That's like your little boy, small inner bitch talking, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's not true, because everybody has a story. And the problem is, I think most people are too afraid that people won't resonate with it or don't care about it, but it's not true. I believe that the way you tell it, how you tell it, is so important, because somebody needs to hear it exactly the way you have it. That's exactly the way you are. And that's what resonates, not trying to be like somebody else. So for me, I've had to like really step into like, what does it look like to create a book? Like, what does that look like? And Samantha, you know, obviously our mutual friend, she was such a crucial part of this process of helping me work through that while I write. You know, like having to go into these deep parts of my life and revisit them, like talking about my dad and hearing about the news of him dying. Like, man, like that's not easy to share in a book.
Yeah.
But I had to say, like, this is going to be bigger than my feelings about the fear around it. Like, I have to be able to share vulnerable things, because that's what the person that I'm writing the book for needs to hear. That was the person 5 years ago myself needed to hear, and that's who I'm speaking to. So I had to get out of my head and into my heart and really feel into like, what does that look like? And as you start to do that daily, you know, you start to become that person. Once to be a writer, you just have to write daily, you know, that's really what it is. And I just continued to just do it and work through that. And this was a probably, aside from the podcast, writing the book was the biggest personal development tool I've ever had, because I had to face so many things, from not only my own limitations, but like dealing with old publishers going bankrupt and literally taking my theories of what I'm talking about and having to apply them in my own life. Because it's one thing to write book or talk about things, but then you have to use them in your own life for them to mean anything. So while I was writing, I had to like really use some of the stuff to get through the actual challenges of life I was going through, which was wild.
Yeah.
And
well, you know, it's so funny because you write these things and you kind of go, oh wait, I'm not doing that consistently enough. Like that, like I know that I do it, but it's not consistent. And in order for me to stay true to what I'm writing here, this needs to be a consistent in my life. And it challenges you through the process.
Totally, man. And that's why it's a beautiful thing. And the more uncomfortable you get, the more you know that it's gonna resonate with people. And at the end of the day, like, I just want to create things that land with people, bro. Like, I just want to create messages that help people. It resonates, it hits deep, and then they actually want to take the steps to change their own life. Like, that's the problem. It's like, if you coach people or you influence people, the best ones are the ones that are able to have that message land and actually have the human do something different. And that's what I hope with my message, is that when I speak, that it hits them in the heart, and it's not all about like the doing of things. It's like, a lot of it is sitting back and listening and learning and observing yourself. And I think having a message that actually hits home to people is what I've really strived to do. Not just write a book, but have something that someone could pick up, that it like hits them on emotional level, but then it also gives them tools that they can use in life. You can probably relate with podcasting too, right? Like, if somebody doesn't resonate with it and doesn't do anything with it, it's useless. So it's like, how important is it for us to get our message to somebody and actually have them do something differently, right? So that's really been something that I've really worked towards, is like, all right, don't speak or talk about things based on what you're hearing outside on social media. Speak and talk about actually from your truth. What does that mean? right? And it's hard to distinguish sometimes between like, you know, your ego and what you hear people's opinions and versus like, yes, but what's true to you? Or you're either living in truth or you're living someone else's story. It's really what it comes down to.
Mm.
And it's like, man, like how challenging can that be at times to stay in that place of truth? It's tough, but that's kind of what the game is the more, for me, the more that I choose these things that are aligned with my heart and my truth and my intuition, the more the opportunities I create that open up the doors of like who I'm meant to be. That makes sense. You know, like I think we can get lost in a lot of this stuff and not really know if the path that we're taking is the path we want to take. Right.
Yeah.
Because we get validation in other ways, but the only one you got to validate is yourself. And I believe the people that make the biggest impact are the ones that are the truest at the core to who they are. And it may sound cliche, but at the end of the day, like with the world we're living in right now, man, I think a lot of the gimmicks and a lot of the bullshit is going to fade away, and people are going to need people that are just real and authentic. And that's what my goal is, to try and keep it as real as I can and share the journey of where I'm at. If I don't have shit figured out, well, here's what I'm doing. Not to say like, go do it like this, but I'm like, here's what I'm doing. It's working. May not be, you know, try it. But that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah, no, I love it. And it's so true. We do get caught up in the validation and the followers and the listeners and the downloads and this, that, and the other thing. But really, if we're approaching, and I've been there, right? Like, and I'm speaking from my own experience, being so worried about what's this look like? What, you know, how many followers do I have? How many downloads am I getting? How many people are paying attention versus actually making an impact? Right. Like I was just so worried about how people would view it for so long. And it's because we get caught up in the, oh, wait, hold on, this person has 1 million followers, or this person has this, or this person has this, right? We talked a little bit about this before I hit record, like how much of that played a part in even you beginning, right? Like part of me starting the podcast, I wanted that. I wanted, you know, all these followers, right? Was that part of you building it to begin with, but then it led to your essentially awakening?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's just, it's such a, social media is such a weird world. It's like, I just feel like there's a lot of tricksters out there tricking people into thinking that they're experts in things they aren't necessarily. And look, at the end of the day, people can buy their way to downloads, to reviews on podcasts, to social media. And at the end of the day, you're the one that has to look yourself in the mirror and say, like, are these people actually wanting to listen to me? Do they actually want to? I shouldn't have to trick them. And as I, you know, my mentor Aubrey Marcus is he's helped, like, we're, you know, working with him and doing Fit for Service for a couple years. I just learned a lot from his leadership. And I, like I said before, like it really, when I get people messaging me saying that this impacted them, or, you know, as you know, people DM you, right? And and they start to message you. When I get that, it's like, okay, I'm doing the right thing. You know, we're not always going to get that feedback of like instant gratification of like 1 million followers, the Joe Rogan effect. Like all of a sudden you're going to get overnight followers. We have to, at first, that's what I was looking for to answer your question. I was like, oh, well, I'm going to have 1 million downloads overnight. I'm just going to turn on a button with everything. And the problem is, like, man, we got to be okay with doing the work and putting in the years. Like we've put in years. You put in a couple, I don't know, what year did you start this?
I'm 6.5 years in.
So I'm going on 4. So we've put in the work, like we've put in the reps.
Yeah.
A lot of people aren't willing to do that. And I think there's this false sense of what success is. And I for me, like that definition has changed so much. And I look at what I used to care about versus what I do now. Yes, of course I want to have more numbers. Of course I want to have this and that. But after realizing what really matters is the impact you make in people's lives, that may take a long time. That may take years to do. That's really what matters though to me, is like how many people are messaging me and saying that this landed with them, or that this episode really helped them think differently. And that has been the thing that has kept me going. But yes, of course, there's times where I'm like, man, like, what is going on here? Why is this person like, is this actually happening? And this is the problem with people and with podcasting, is people don't want to do things because they're not getting those kind of results. And it's like, it's not even real results.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, that people think because they don't get this instant credibility overnight that they're not doing something right. And that's just not true. So it stops people from doing things. And I think social media has a lot to do with that shit. It's such a great tool in so many ways, but can also work against you. So yeah. So for nowadays, man, I'm just trying to figure out like, how can I best serve people with my gifts? Like that's, and if opportunities open up, and I'm just going to keep chipping away. And, I'm sure the followers and all the things will come.
Yeah.
But, this is life is a long game, right? Like we're in this for the long haul. So what's the rush? Right.
Yeah, dude. And it's so true. And I think you hit it on the head, right? Like if we just focus on the impact and we stay true to ourselves, we don't try and be somebody else. That's all that matters, right? Like that's literally all that matters. And I'm very much like you when I get the DMs, like, oh, this message resonated with me. Oh, I loved this. Thank you so much. And now people are, they share out the reels and they'll tag you and they're like, wow, listen to this. That's it, man. It's just that one person at a time. And you've been building that one person at a time for 4 years, and I've been building that one person at a time for 6.5 years. And I think as people watch, I think where you and I are, that's a real trajectory. That's what to expect versus this false expectation of social media, right? Like if I didn't do what I do, I would be on social media. Like I despise it. Like it's terrible. But again, if used for good, it's good.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the tough part. Now you'd mentioned your definition of success has changed over time. There's a question that I ask every single guest on the show. It is a 2-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of success? And the second part is, what are 3 things you do every single day to ensure that success for yourself?
Ooh. Well, success, obviously making money and all of that is important for me. Like that is because I feel like it's a direct reflection of the value you bring to the world. But I also believe that sometimes, I think Alex Hormozy was talking about this. He was saying that just because you don't see it exactly right now doesn't mean it's not working. And for me, like there's been so much outward investing and putting things out into the world that, yeah, we've created revenue, we've been doing all right, but it's not to the level that I want. So financial success is a big deal to me, but what's really important to me is being completely at peace with myself at the end of the day, knowing that I'm doing shit I want to do and I'm making impact. Like, and I know from that, if I'm committed to that for years, then that's the byproduct is financial security, wealth in relationships, wealth in experiences. It's not just about money, right? Like there's people that have a lot of money, but haven't traveled, haven't seen things, haven't done things. It really comes down to what matters to you. And for me, it's kind of the whole, I want to have all areas of my life, abundance in all areas of my life. Yeah. And that doesn't just mean a huge bank account. It's like, well, how is my relationship with my family, my mom? Have I healed that yet? If I'm still fighting with my mom like a 10-year-old kid, then, you know, maybe I'm not as successful, right? It's like being able to figure out all areas of life and to be able to have a grip and feel good about that and feel good about your, you know, again, am I living in my purpose, my truth? Am I on the path to doing that? Like we hear this talk about find your purpose and all of that all the time, but it's true. Like, are you actually doing the thing you want to do? Because if you aren't, you should be trying. So that's kind of what it means to me. Is success to me is being on the endless pursuit to remembering what I'm here to do and continuing to push the boundaries of what that looks like. It's like a video game. Every level gets a little harder, right? It gets a little bit more complicated. But once you push over that, you got to expect that. And success for me is going to change each level I get to, because as soon as I get to the next level, it's going to open up different things. And then maybe I'll value new things. Like maybe I'll want to do more philanthropy work that I hadn't been able to do in the past. And that's success. I think each level brings its own new definition. If it's just financial success that you want, well, that's great too. But for me, it's being able to have this well-rounded life experience that I feel good about and I feel happy about, that I've experienced it to the fullest. And to answer your questions, what I do every day, I won't say that I do them every day. I'm not going to lie and bullshit you. I wish I could say that. You know, I wish I could say I do them every day. But 3 things that really work for me to get me set up for the best day, like if I know I need to own the day and I know that there's just no fucking around: meditation, journaling, and reading. Simple. And obviously move my body and sweat. If I can do those 4 things and hammer back a bunch of water in the morning, my day is great. Why I don't do those every day, that's the thing. That's the dance of figuring that out. Why don't I do them? What is the excuse? Yeah. Right? So those things have been powerful to me. And even though sometimes we know the things we're supposed to do, we don't do them. And why? And that fascinates me. I feel like it starts the night before. It starts the night before. Like, what seeds you plan for the next day? You know, reading Atomic Habits right now and reading for the 3rd time, and I'm picking up things. It's like the
That's
environmental. It's so good, man. The environmental cues are so important. Like, okay, tomorrow morning, if you want to meditate, like have your night mask nearby, or if you want to read a book, have the book there, have the journal, the pen, have things ready so that you can see it, right? Have your gym gear by the door, ready to go, that kind of stuff. And yeah, those have been the most powerful for me, man. I feel like connecting to self, to God, to intuition, to spirit, whatever you want to call it, is so important. Reflecting on your journal, like gratitude, writing it down, and then absorbing some good knowledge for the day, and then topping it up with a great sweat. For me, that opens up a great day ahead.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So I want to ask you a question. I used to ask it to everybody, and I haven't. I asked it recently, and I feel like I want to ask it with you. Sure. You know, we create content. We're content creators, right? So so when we die, this is going to be around forever. As long as people are listening to podcasts, they can access our shows. As long as that Libsyn bill gets paid after you die, that's the key. It'll be there.
True.
So what if that all goes away and the world only remembers you for 1 sentence? What would you like that sentence to be?
What's coming to me is simple, but not always easy. And live in your truth. And I think figuring out what that is the game of life. What is that? And that itself is a pursuit of what is the truth to you. It's nobody else, right? And I think that would be what I would say. And I mean, I could probably think of a bunch of things, but figure out what you need to do the healing you need to do, the people you need to meet, whatever you need to do to get what that is, the clarity of what that truth is to you. And yeah, I mean, that's yeah, living your truth.
Love it, man. So tell us about the new book, dude. Like, number one, congratulations. Like,
Thanks.
I know for a fact that writing a book isn't easy, especially when you're pouring your heart and your emotions into it. But tell us a little bit about it and all the good stuff. Where can people get it?
Yeah, so it's called Mastering Adversity, Unlock the Warrior Within, Turn Your Biggest Struggles into Your Greatest Gifts. And the goal here is to really help people take ownership of their life, you know, and realize that it's not about being perfect. It's about looking at your past, doing what you can to understand that you are here because of that, and that's okay. But now, what do I need to do to take complete ownership of your life? And that's where I talk about the warrior. The warrior archetype is something that came to me that I've been fascinated with, that is a lot different than most people's definition of the warrior. This came to me through a breathwork ceremony that I really felt called to explore. And the warrior was just a word that I felt that represents the archetype of what is missing in the world today, and how everybody within us has the warrior in them. If you're alive today, your families, your people had to survive so much crazy shit for you to be here today. So I want people to remember how powerful they are, in that through storytelling and through my own story of what I've been through, what I've learned, who I've learned from, you know, I've been able to learn from professional athletes. I've been able to learn from, you know, New York Times bestselling authors, been mentored by many, to be able to create this formula that I actually use when I was struggling. And I encourage people to really figure out what that warrior means to you, and how to bring that out, and how to, you know, be able to, if you need to battle, you need to attack and stand up for what's right. You need to be able to do that with confidence. But you also need to be able to be, this is what's missing in our society, is to shut the fuck up and listen for a change, and sit and observe and feel into the situation. Have compassion, have empathy for people where they're at, and really take that time to connect to your intuition, to your heart. This is what a lot of people don't do. This is what a lot of people, our society is like, it's so driven for the success of money that a lot of this is like, people are just so traumatized that they're just, it's an addiction to the success of money. And that's great. But what are we really doing here? Like, what are we really here for? Like, that's the thing. And that's different for everybody. So I'm not saying I have it all figured out, but the goal of this book is to help people see themselves in what I'm talking about in the story, and then to give them a roadmap of how to work through adversity when they see it, and how to understand, how do you react when something terrible happens? You know, what do you do? What are your behaviors? And from that, again, it's not about beating yourself up. It's like, okay, I remember that now. Okay, what do I do now to remedy this? Like, what are the solutions to this in the moment? And that's the goal here, is to not create this like shame of like, oh, you're an idiot for doing this. We all do these things. I talk about them in the archetypes: the distractor, the victim, the fixer, and the warrior. And how we show up in these different things. But the key is it's okay, but then what are we going to do differently in the moment? And that awareness is the key. Awareness is the key. When you're aware of your behaviors, when you're aware of the shit that you're doing when a challenging situation happens, the only way you can change it is by being aware. So once you're aware, you can make the correction. And that's the goal, is to actually have somebody read this and be like, all right, this landed with me. Now I want to use this in my own life because I see this happening. And now I can use this and make different decisions. And that's the whole point of the book. is to actually have a roadmap for people to use. So really excited about it.
Love it, man. Love it.
Thank you,
So
brother.
and before I get to my final question, where can people grab the book and where can people get a hold of you, follow you, all that stuff?
Yeah, it's on. If you go right now, it's all through my Instagram. Just follow me on Instagram, link in the bio. It takes you to all the things, to the book, to the podcast, all of that. So Lance.Essihos. Also my website's lanceessihos.com. It's pretty easy. I'm pretty searchable on Google. And yeah, so that's all there. And yeah, Instagram's the best way to follow me. That's where I'm most active.
Sweet. Love it. Love it. Like I said, I wrap up every single interview with the same question. And that question is, in your life, what has been your biggest moment of growth?
The 1 year I went sober in 2017. That was the biggest year of growth. And I would say that the writing of this book was the second. But the first one that made the most impact, man, going sober for 1 year after being an absolute nightmare working in nightclubs, going sober for a year was like, I was literally living a different life, like night and day. So if anybody's struggling with alcohol out there, you go a year sober, your fucking life will change. And for me, it's such a blessing that year because it opened up so much opportunity and it allowed me to stop digging myself out of holes and allowed me to start building on the foundation. Because anybody that struggles with substance, you get to a point, you fall off and you're constantly digging yourself out till you feel good enough and then you fall back in. And when you don't fall back in and you just keep building on that foundation, magic happens. You just, and then you allow yourself to attract better things in your life. So yeah, that was it for me.
Love it, dude. Love it. Lance, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your journey and sharing your story. And thank you for putting it down in a book, man. I think, you know, part of the reason I'm getting into the book game is because I know that it hits different, right? Like that's where the message really gets heard and gets instilled, man. So thank you so much for showing up 100% you, dude. This has been great.
Thank you, bro. I appreciate it. And I'm stoked for your book too. Stoked.
Yeah, well, hopefully soon. Fingers crossed. Yeah. We'll see.
Then we'll get you back. Then we'll get you back on my show to promote your book, brother.
Sounds good, man. I appreciate it. We'll talk soon.
Cheers.